Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Copilot Lead Speak, the series where we learn more about Copilot for security and the AI security field in general. My name's Sarah Young, I'm your host, and today with me I have Laura. Laura, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Laura, I've had the privilege of knowing you for a long time, but for those folks who may not know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you're here?
Absolutely. So I'm a weird sort of hybrid. So first of all, what I do day to day, I'm the CEO and founder of SafeStack. So we're a community-centric education platform, and we can roll out an AppSec program for teams, big or small, around the world in 15 minutes that can bring everyone on the team into doing security in just 1 hour per sprint. Now, what does that really mean? I'm a mix of part software engineer and part security person, and I am fascinated and so excited about how technology is being built today and how we can bring security into that without it getting in the way of the innovation that we need to do great things in the world.
So Laura, you work with developers day in, day out, and you've been talking to them about security, but I'd be interested to hear about how things have changed, those conversations maybe in the past year as AI technology has become much more mainstream. Have they changed? Are you still having the same kind of conversations around security, or what's your experience there?
So I think there are some fundamentals of application security, securing software, that have been there for 15, 20 years and will probably be there for as long as we're building software. So the common vulnerability types that we see, the importance of when we choose to trust and when we validate, and what we do with data that has been entrusted with us, they are still there. I think what has changed, however, is the focus on, rather than hoping a tool or some kind of magic technology is going to find bugs in our code later on and just handle them for us, there's more of a push for a design-led approach to security. And when you're building with AI components, instead of it being a linear system where you put in your inputs and it does 3 steps and the same output's going to come every time, you've got this now element that is less predictable, that is evolving with time. And so the approaches we would have traditionally taken on validation, on ensuring those pathways, don't work as well. So there's a lot of really interesting questions out there about, well, how do we understand the risk of a system if the system is changing its logic over time? How do we understand and measure the risk of an AI element that we've added, whether it's from a third-party vendor or something we've written? How do we judge this is fit for purpose and this is safe to use? Because we don't have benchmarks for this. We don't have a standard to say, yes, this is okay. And I think those dynamic elements, they are what a lot of time is being spent on right now. But I would urge anyone who is, coming to this new, those are great. They're really very important. But those fundamentals that I mentioned at the start are really the crux of it. It's those applied consistently for every single project you write, whether it's AI-based or not, that make the most substantial difference to the security of our software.
Now, I actually know, I also give the same message to many folks. We have the Microsoft Digital Defense Report, which comes out every year, and every year it has a page about security hygiene and the basics. So that goes a little bit further than just software, but essentially our research shows, and I know it's not just Microsoft's research, shows that something like 95% of security issues would have been avoided if we did the basics right.
Mm-hmm. Our brains are jerks though, right? So our brains love dopamine. Dopamine comes from solving novel challenges, new things we haven't seen before. So when we give people a standard list and say, look, for as long as there's been software, these things have been a problem, you should do these things. The engineers in us that like that new challenge, that novelty, that dopamine kind of go, oh, cool, I'll get to that, but I want to do this challenge first. And I feel that myself, both as a security person and as an engineer. So one of the things that we need to be better at is either not skipping those boring basics or use our engineering superpowers to automate all of those boring basics away. So if your brain is going to want to focus on the innovation, the cool new tech, that cool new AI thing you want to build into your product, cool. Spend your engineering money first and get that automation in place, get those boring basics done, and it's going to free you up to be more innovative and to go faster in your software dev.
Makes sense. Now, I'm sure many people who are watching hopefully already know what those basics are, but if you needed to give the audience a rundown, what are the key basics for software developers that you, from a security perspective, that you'd want folks to hit?
So a lot of people will come to you and they'll talk about the OWASP Top 10, which is a list of common web application security vulnerabilities. And in fact, now they've got lists for mobile. There's a new OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, which was released recently. So all great resources. But I'm going to simplify it back even further. So if you look at all of the OWASP Top 10, there are some common themes that underlie them. So our systems, our software is made of data we've taken from one place, and we're going to do something to it, and we're going to send it off on its adventure somewhere. That relationship, that processing of the data is underlying most things. We look at SQL injection, for example, which is where we're passing potentially malicious data right the way down to the SQL interpreter on a system. That is trusting data. And the endpoint of that data in this case is a SQL interpreter. The important things we need to remember is it's the same rules whether it is cross-site scripting, which is an injection attack, the browser's handling of JavaScript, to SQL injection. What you need to do is you take a data, you take some data in.
Yes.
Take your data in, and then you're going to go, right, I'm not going to trust it. It doesn't matter if it came from the desk next to you. It doesn't matter if it came from an internal system. We're just going to say, no, I'm not going to trust it. I'm going to validate it, or I'm going to encode it, and I'm going to check it in some way, and I'm going to process it in a way that by the time it reaches its end location, that it's safe. Now, a really fun example, if you want to see these basics play out, is if you think about a chatbot that you have in an application, you know, when you're talking to customer support.
Oh, yes.
So if you put something malicious...
Sometimes questionably useful, but depending on the chatbot.
But, you know, it's nice. I get lonely. I like to talk to someone on the internet. Don't judge.
I've seen some very fun manipulation of those things as well.
Exactly. And so one of the important things we talk about in chatbots is that input comes in, could be anything. It's from somewhere out in the universe. And so we spend a lot of time talking about, well, the chatbot takes the input and then we validate it and we encode it and make sure that anything malicious has been taken out or made safe. What we don't talk about is where that chat script ends up next. So imagine your system once a month, your support team who handle all these messages, they run an analysis to look for sentiment using their new AI components across the chat. So all of that raw chat text has been taken into another system entirely. So when you're looking at the security of it, you're not just looking at the security of that chatbot there and then. You're looking at that chat interaction content through its whole life. So if one day it's going to turn up in a PDF report for your admin team to do sentiment analysis, you need to make sure it's still safe to use there. And I find it a fascinating problem, even though it's those repeatable things. Because when you really look at the life of data through our systems and how many wonderful ways we use it, that gives you a huge scope for improving your security at every stage.
Yeah. In fact, I think data security, and you can tell me if you agree, seems to have been one of the main concerns a lot of people who are adopting AI technology. It seems to be top of mind.
Absolutely.
But what's interesting to me is that, in my opinion, Sarah's personal opinion, is that data security, we've never been, as an industry, particularly strong at classifying, labeling our data for systems to use in the way that we want. And I think that AI has more just put a spotlight on an existing problem. I'd be keen to hear what you think, though.
Well, I don't even think it's a technology problem. This is a very human problem, again. You know, if I think about how I structure information in my life, I'd love to say there's a very organized version of me that, you know, puts everything away where it's supposed to be and it's all catalogued and so I can find it easily. This is an absolute lie. I have children and a life and hobbies, and sometimes I do it really, really well, but sometimes I just dump it in a pile and hope that I get back to it later and it'll still be there. And we digitally do the same thing. We talk about minimum retention periods for data a lot. We have to keep tax data for X amount of time for legal reasons. But we don't spend time talking about the other side of the importance of not keeping data, of if we can't organize it, if we can't keep control over it for a long period of time, then why keep it at all? And I think AI has really forced to the front of mind that kind of tension between we want to keep it because maybe it'll be useful, we can do something cool with it later. But if it's going into these AI systems, it's being used to train things, that's going to present itself for a very long period after that data should no longer be in our systems. And it has that potential to expose data that wouldn't necessarily reach that audience by itself. or use it to make decisions that might harm people or be used against people in other ways. It's complex. So I think one of the things we need to be better at as an industry, now that AI really is accelerating the pace of these systems, is being very selective in what we collect and what we store, because it's much, much easier for us to protect a small amount and then really track its life cycle than to be quite as, let's say, greedy with our collection as we are now.
Yeah, and of course, the telemetry just in general has exploded, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of organizations have inadvertently ended up with much more data than they realize.
Well, I can put it into the cloud and it just goes somewhere into, you know, a database system and I never have to think about it. It scales for me, which is wonderful until you look at your credit card statement at the end of the month and go, cool, that's a lot of data.
Exactly. It's definitely a problem. But that's one of the basics. Are there any other basics, like fundamentals, that you think application security folks need to think about?
So let's think about authentication, right? And authorization. Firstly, everyone at home, it's my one mission in the world, is let's stop abbreviating those two words. They abbreviate to the same word and it drives me a little bit crazy. So no more auth, we have authorization, authentication. Consistently applying these things throughout your application, through every part, is really, really key. Now, how you store those passwords, the types of choices you make by using things like two-factor authentication to secure your accounts can make a phenomenal difference. Yeah. Most of the attacks we see against web applications are not sophisticated. The attacker didn't turn up today and go, you know, I'm going to bring out this Hollywood-style heist to attack this. They're going to go after what we call the low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
So if your passwords are really easy to guess because you've let your users have, you know, 6 characters and it can be just password, you're going to see more challenges with that. Now, that's a double-edged sword, though, because you have to really consider your users. If your users aren't particularly technical, then free yourself up to think about authentication in a different way. Do they need a password? Can we look at alternatives to passwords in the future? And I know that's something that Microsoft are very much keen on in the future, passwordless tomorrow.
Oh, I know. Well, we use it internally. I'm not sure I can remember my corporate password. No, I can, but I don't use it virtually ever because we are full-on passwordless in Microsoft.
And I think this is the way things need to go. We're all getting older. We're all using more and more accounts across the place. We know that passwords are terrible. So let's move on. And as an engineering community, the best people to design that future state for authentication are the people who are joining us for this today. So I'm really excited to see what we come up with.
Yeah, and you're right. It's very easy for us as more technical engineers to say, oh, just have an app on your phone. But there are many user bases out there that's not necessarily practical for. But
Absolutely.
But we have so many options now. That's not the be-all and end-all necessarily.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we forget that security can be innovative too. It can be an area of your app that can make you stand out. Not because you made it painful and hard, but because you made it easy. Because you made security so seamless for the people, they forgot it was there. And that's the dream state, right?
Oh, yes.
Security people like ourselves, our job is to make it super easy for engineers to do incredible work and keep it safe. And so I am looking forward to seeing how this goes.
So you spend your day-to-day life trying to help devs have a more security-focused mindset. Of course, whilst they're very busy doing other things. But we know that historically there's often been a bit of tension between the security department and developers. So for those people who are with us at home, who may have the same problems in their organization, do you have any tips for how we can encourage developers to be more security-minded, but of course not at the expense of their productivity?
Sure. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bust a couple of myths, because there's going to be folks who are, you know, joining us today, and they're like, yeah, well, everyone else has this giant security team, and we're only 20 people, and we can't do this. We did a survey at SafeStack last year. We surveyed about 1,000 organizations around the world, ranging from giant Microsoft-style organizations right the way down to teeny tiny ones. And less than 10% had an AppSec team. In fact, the average size of AppSec across them was half a person. So if you are the type of person you're like, well, we don't have anyone to help, that's okay. That's actually more normal than you could possibly imagine. We spend a lot of time listening to these big stories from larger organizations, and sometimes we can believe that's normal. But most of us, you know, my company builds software as well as me helping dev teams. we're doing the best we can. And I think it's okay to be like that in security. We want to aim for more secure than yesterday, not perfect. There's no perfect here. The other thing that we need to do is understand that the relationship between security and dev hasn't worked because we've had misaligned incentives. So as an engineer, as a developer, or a member of the dev team, if you are in UX or in testing or at one of those other key roles, you're incentivized to go fast, to build new features and to get them shipped, and hopefully keep your uptime really healthy and happy. Now, on the other side, on the security team, their job is to make sure nothing in the entire world goes wrong, which is a pretty big weight to carry.
Yes.
So if you're looking at it from incentives, a security team are going to say, hey, slow down, wait, I need to understand more, there's too much risk here. And the engineering team are going, no, but we're going to go fast because that's how we're measured. We have to work out that balance. We have to make it so that our security team feels safe to go fast and know that there's some risks that they can't identify or remediate, that maybe they might have to just respond to them afterwards. And that our engineering team know that there are ways to get support so that security can go fast with them. From my point of view, it comes down to respect. As a security person, if I'm going to go to a development team and say, hey, everyone, I want you to do these additional things in your world, I'm not going to give you any extra budget, any extra time, and you're still going to be judged on the same things, then I need to make sure that whatever I'm providing works for them, works for their technology, and is practical. If it's going to cause friction, if it's going to slow them down, that's not respecting the constraints of their world. And then what I ask for in return is that they communicate to me and say, hey, look, that doesn't work. This new tool that you found for us, it slows us down, it broke our build. Or that if we give a lightweight process, that it's followed. And if that following means writing a robot to do it for you, I don't care, as long as it gets done. So I think we're getting a lot better at this now. And I think we're understanding each other more and we're finding a shared language, but there's a little way to go. So maybe all of us two as, people who are quite public and those folks who are joining us, try and find that shared language with the security people in your world or with the devs if you are on that security side and see how much easier you can make it when you make people not scared of failing, whichever way they're measured and monitored.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked from a number of organizations throughout the years, and there's definitely a varying degrees of relationships or good working relationships between security and devs. What I've noticed when I've been along my travels and I've talked to other parts of IT is that they have often historically been burnt by security and are actually quite scared to approach them, or they've had a negative experience in the past, and so they just sort of try and skirt around it rather than engage and have that dialogue that you were talking about. So if you happen to be in an organization where say the development team have been burnt by security in the past and are reluctant to engage, do you have any tips for security folks for building those bridges again? Because the fact is, this is a reality for a not insignificant portion of folks out there.
Yeah, and I think the saying is true that old wounds take a long time to heal. And so some of the tension, some of the stories that we encounter when we're, dealing with teams all around the world is, the stories, oh yeah, well, historically this has happened. And when you really dig into when did this happen? Oh, it was 10 years ago and 3 people ago. Hasn't happened in a long time, but the cultural memory is still there, the cultural scar tissue, if you will. So I think we need a bit of a reset. I think we need to be better at positive confrontation. So, it's okay to say, hey, I don't understand that. Could you show me? Could you walk me through it? Or, hey, this isn't going to work for us. We, as engineers, a lot of us are introverted. A lot of us don't like conflict. We don't like that, but we're coming from very different viewpoints. So there has to be a little bit of tension in there. It's very natural. So we've got to practice having those conversations. Now, if I give you a tip as an exercise folks can do at home that isn't going to, be too much in your real world, but is close enough that it'll be useful, invite some of your security folk and some of your engineers. Also bring your QAs. They always get left out of the cool stuff. Bring some QAs, bring some UX, bring some of your folks together. Then I want you to get into a room with a whiteboard, some paper, pens. I want you to relax a little bit, and I want you to plan a bank robbery. I want you to draw out your theoretical bank. I'm not talking an electronic bank robbery here. This is not an app thing. I want you to think about the floor plan of a high street bank. And I want you to figure out how you're going to steal something. Now, for the first few minutes, everyone's going to be really reserved because they don't want to say that silly idea because, well, they'll get judged. And then somebody is going to be brave and somebody is going to put forward an idea and go, cool, I'm going to rappel in like it's in Mission Impossible, or they're going to do something. And before you know it, everyone has a whole bunch of ideas how they're robbing this bank. And some people are, going on dating adventures to try and social engineer their way in. And some people are breaking windows. And what it gives you is this safety. For me, security, particularly software security, is creative. It is playful. It is about thinking about a system or a building or an organization and going, right, that's how it's supposed to be used, but what if I did something else? And so that exercise is going to give you that freedom, that confidence to share those. And one of the biggest things it will get us over is that inability we sometimes have to raise our hand and say, hey, I think that there's an issue here. I think this thing could happen. Can we talk about it? Because you'll have practiced in a safe space.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. You're giving me a lot of ideas for what I might want to go and do with people next time I'm in a room with engineers. That could get interesting.
It's a lot of fun.
I can imagine. I think I'd love to be a fly on the wall when you did this with some people.
Yeah. Just a bit of a tip. If you do have a deeply introverted group, and they do exist, and you struggle because you all sit there looking at each other, kind of waiting for somebody to break the ice, somewhere in your network of friends and community will be somebody deeply creative. They're probably in theatre, or they might write scripts or whatever. Find yourself an agent of chaos. Somebody who can sit in that room and embrace their inner toddler for you and go, cool, I'm going to press all the buttons at once. What happens now? So just know your group, know your dynamic. And if you need that extra nudge, there's no shame in just pulling somebody in who can just be that catalyst for you.
Yeah, and might sound like an obvious question, but you could do this whether or not you have an ordinary application, I say ordinary in inverted commas, or you're building new AI-enabled things.
Absolutely.
It's the same.
And, a great time to do this is if you're taking an existing application that you know really well, maybe you've been working on it for several years, or your team has, and you're putting in a new innovative component that really dynamically shifts it like AI would, then bringing this as an exercise at this point is really good, because it's going to force you to see something you've seen every day in a new angle, in a new light. So use that event, that new technology that you're embracing, as a reason to really play with and get creative with your threat modeling. That's what we would call it, looking at what could go wrong in your application.
Yeah, I think people could have a lot of fun with this, right?
Yeah.
And build some relationships along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you feel safe to sit in the same room as somebody who you don't know much about, and they're driven by completely different incentives, but you can both look at something and go, cool, but what if I went evil and this is going to happen? And you can laugh about it, and you can see, is this likely? Is it not likely? And have that conversation. This conversation is going to be much, much easier every time you have them.
Yeah, I've always found that, like you said, that different teams are incentivized in different ways, and often they just haven't thought about the security aspect. It's not that they don't understand or that they or anything like that, or they don't care. It's just it's not top of mind for them.
So top myths of software security, right? And I'm sick of hearing them. Please, universe, stop it. Development teams are not lazy. Nope, they're incredibly busy and time poor and budget constrained, and they have a lot to do. That they are stupid and can't understand it. Absolute rubbish. Software security is engineering. If we look at the ilities, so observability, the usability, accessibility of our systems, security should be in that list. Our engineering teams already look after all of the other ilities. Security's already there. We should trust them to do it. We don't believe at SafeStack, and I don't believe professionally or personally, that there is an engineer out there who doesn't want to do a good job, who doesn't want to build an amazing system. It's just that they haven't had that experience. They haven't had the opportunity to safely think like that. And once they have started down that path, once they have explored it and built that muscle memory a bit, it makes security actually just a really cool part of innovation.
Now, there might be people who are tuning in at home who are thinking, well, this sounds amazing, and I'd love to do a bank robbery, but and they should, I think, but
not a real one. We don't tell them to do
it's not a real bank robbery.
Just to clarify.
The fictional
Absolutely.
tabletop bank robbery.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah, let's let's definitely clarify that tabletop bank robbery.
Yeah.
But of course, people have jobs to do, they have to get on.
Yeah.
And so do you have any sort of quick wins? We've talked about the basics, but are there any quick wins that maybe a security person who, they've got or a developer, actually let's swap that around. If we have a developer who's wanting to build something AI enabled, they go into their security team, and maybe it's a not so forward thinking team that do the traditional, I don't know what this is, so I'm just going to say no. Do you have any tips for devs or even the security folks on the other side about how they can start having that conversation in a productive way rather than kind of the...
Yeah, so if you're on the engineering side, I'll do the two sides separately so that we have a bit of a homework set for both. I think it's fair to give them both homework. So if you're on the engineering side, firstly, don't just rock up and say, I found a new cool technology and we're going to do a thing. That's going to terrify anyone. It'll terrify your marketing team because they don't know what's going to go on either. So let's just take a breath. Before we get to the stage, before we commit to using the technology, we want to make sure we've done our due diligence. So your security team are going to ask you, have you considered security? And they don't mean in the broader everything could go wrong sense, but have you thought about the basics? If it is a library or a framework or a technology you're inheriting from another organization, who builds it? What support do we have? Has it been through any testing? All those kind of things. They're going to expect you to do your homework. So delight and surprise them by coming with your homework done. Now, there are some really great free checklists out there for the kinds of questions you want to ask, one of which I'm actually going to share in my NDC talk this week. So just check online. There are loads out there for it. So come along with it, but also come along with an understanding of where this fits into your wider architecture. So what data is this going to handle? Where is that data going to live? How long is it going to live there? If something went wrong and we needed to back this technology out, what would we need to do, and can we do that? They're the kinds of things that a security person is going to ask you. So come prepared. The security side. You're going to get somebody come up to you and they're going to be super excited. Now, don't be sad at their excitement. It's not our job to be like, I will squish your dreams. We're there to not kind of hinder them, but to enable them and coach them into making these decisions for themselves. So firstly, you might have corporate guidance that you can help them with, maybe guardrails or some sort of design pattern you could share. That would be super useful. If you don't, then maybe this is an opportunity for you to create these kind of things with your dev team. What would be useful for you if you're going to come and see us? What resources can we provide you to make this easy? Listen more than you speak, security people. It's really hard to do, I know. But listen to why they want to do it. What is this going to give them? Where does it come from? Because there's normally a pain that's being solved. And if they don't solve it with that technology, they're going to need to solve it with something else. So make sure you understand that first. And know the most expensive word you have in your vocabulary. You can still use it, but when you say it, it has to come with gravitas. It comes with weight. And that way, you know that you're only going to say it if it matters, and they will respect you're only going to say no if it really is a big no. Our job in security is to coach and to guide and support engineering to do things safely. And if we both come in prepared for that conversation, it can go a lot smoother.
So if people wanted to learn more about AppSec and maybe some tips or activities, we've of course talked about the tabletop bank robbery, but are there any other things that you would recommend to those people who are tuning in at home?
Yeah, absolutely. I love my industry. I've been in security a long time. One thing we're really bad at is promoting the amazing resources that are out there. So please do check out OWASP's website, the Open Worldwide Security Project. They have a whole bunch of checklists, books, and tools that you can use. A little bit more practically, I'd like to set your audience a bit of a challenge. Okay. So we run a completely free program. It's not a trick, and it's called 1 Hour AppSec. We're setting teams a challenge all around the world of bringing AppSec to their world in just 1 hour per sprint. So if you go to onehourappsec.com, there are a whole bunch of weeks you can follow, and it gives you all of the material, so a few very short videos, some templates, some guidance of how to do a specific AppSec thing for that sprint. So if you follow along those, you're going to actually get quite a long way towards doing some AppSec on a consistent basis. And there's a whole bunch of materials you'll enjoy. So join about 200 teams around the world at the moment and see if you can get started in just 1 hour per sprint.
That sounds like a really good place to start, especially if, people are still struggling a little bit to get their AppSec off the ground. And
Absolutely. Now, best case scenario, you've got a whole team that are going to join you. But if you're in a big team and the whole team isn't ready for it yet, just do it for yourself. Because you might find that that little ripple you make, that little, visibility of you doing a bit of security becomes contagious in your team. And before you know it, other people are going, oh, cool, I should do that too. And that's what this is about. It's about making it accessible, easy to do, and something that's not going to get in the way of what you actually want to do every day, which is building amazing software.
well, Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you all day long, but you're very busy and I should let you get back to helping all those devs. But thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to all of you at home for tuning in. I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Copilot Lead Speak. Join us again next time for another exciting episode where we'll learn more about Copilot for security and AI security in general. Until next time, I'm Sarah Young, and take care.